opening phase of the operation consisted of a series of preemptive and still ongoing decapitation strikes. Here we see airstrikes on the IRGC headquarters in northern Tehran. Here we have footage released by the IDF showing a wave of strikes on Hezbollah command centers in Beirut. And here we see an image from the aftermath of the strike that killed Iran's supreme leader on the first day of the war. These decapitation strikes are currently an ongoing process. This means that whenever leadership positions are filled again, the Americans and Israelis attempt to eliminate those individuals immediately. So far, this strategy appears to have been so successful that even Trump himself said it is unclear who, when, or how anyone can currently take over the leadership of the country. But listen for yourself.
Do you have someone in mind right now? Because you said all the people you did have in mind have been taken out. What do you think?
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group, they may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in. Pretty soon we're not going to know anybody.
With successful, I mean that they are repeatedly cutting off the head of the metaphorical Hydra whenever it grows back. I will not go into the long-term consequences this could have for Iran or the wider region. I understand that there is certainly room for criticism of this strategy, but since I am not a lawyer, I will leave that discussion aside for now. It is estimated that by now the United States has launched hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles at targets inside Iran. At the moment, the prevailing view is that Tomahawk missiles can take up to 2 years to produce, meaning there is no quick way to replenish these stockpiles. Together with the heavy use of interceptor missiles from systems such as Patriot or THAAD, this has sparked some criticism within parts of the defense community. Some analysts argue that the current burn rate of expensive precision munitions and interceptor missiles could become problematic if the conflict drags on for an extended period of time. These depletion rates, so the argument goes, could create long-term vulnerabilities in a potential future conflict with China. However, I think that the previously mentioned unprecedented increase in strike effectiveness through AI could mean that the use of these high-precision systems may now be reduced. At least that is what Hexeth suggested.
We used more exquisite standoff munitions at the start, but no longer need to. Our stockpiles of those, as well as Patriots, remains extremely strong.
This assessment also correlates with the data showing a significant decline in the number of Iranian ballistic missile launchers since the beginning of the conflict. I am not saying that the risk mentioned in this criticism does not exist, but it also appears that the effectiveness factor of AI in the rapid degradation of Iran's strike capabilities has not been fully taken into account. So as long as Iran, in terms of ballistic missile launch capabilities, does not have any aces up its sleeve in the eastern parts of the country, I see a good chance that the plan of the current US administration could at least partially succeed, given the insanely high attrition rate we are currently observing. I mean, just as I was writing these lines, this thing here happened, or rather surfaced online. It is a video from Iranian state TV, showing an Iranian ammunition depot going off in Bushehr. In general, there was a pretty huge influx of footage, especially during the first 3 days of the war. But for now, the same pattern can be observed as with the ballistic missile launches. The number of videos coming out of the region has decreased. This likely has something to do with internet blackouts in Iran and a tight OPSEC regime in Israel and the Gulf states, but we will get to that later. After briefly but comprehensively covering the US and Israeli strike campaign, I also need to report on Iran's response so that you can get a more complete picture of the events. So what did Iran's response look like? As already mentioned, it consisted of a flood of ballistic missiles and cheap one-way drones of the Shahed type. However, the bulk of the attacks did not target Israel, but rather another state that one would not necessarily have expected to come under such heavy Iranian retaliation. But which country this is, I will tell you in a moment, after briefly summarizing the presumed logic behind Iran's strikes. First of all, it must be said that the Iranian attacks were not as effective as many had feared. For that reason, I would classify a large number of these strikes simply as retaliatory attacks intended to spread terror. Nevertheless, the Iranian calculus appears to have followed at least a partially mathematical logic, with the hope of creating an attrition effect on the stockpiles of air defense systems used by Israel, the United States, and the other states that became targets of the missiles and drones. Furthermore, Iran has actively tried to degrade the early warning and detection capabilities of the United States, Israel, and their allies by deliberately targeting numerous military installations and radar sites. These attacks definitely occurred, and it appears that some of them were at least partially successful, based on battle damage assessment satellite imagery, but more on that later. The third apparent goal of the Iranian retaliation is to draw the whole region, and potentially the global economy, into chaos by targeting the energy infrastructure of neighboring Gulf countries. The aim here appears to be driving up oil and energy prices, and thereby creating political pressure on the United States, both globally and on the domestic stage. For this purpose, it was not primarily Israel but rather the Gulf states, most notably the United Arab Emirates and the city of Dubai, that became targets of Iranian attacks. This graphic shows the distribution of attacks across the different states. Even though the numbers may have changed slightly by now, the overall trend is clear. The Iranians hope to quickly overwhelm the Emiratis with missiles, who until now had never faced such a barrage before, and are generally known to avoid direct confrontation. Iran therefore believed that the Emiratis, as well as the other Gulf states, would quickly buckle and put pressure on the Americans to call off the war. However, this of course did not happen. In fact, it must be said that the Gulf states, and particularly the United Arab Emirates, have so far handled the situation quite bravely and impressively. And I am not saying this because I have worked with one of their defense contractors in the past. In fact, this video is not sponsored, and this is my own honest opinion. The Emiratis have really kept a very cool head so far. This is shown, on the one hand, by the fact that they have so far taken no retaliatory measures against Iran, and that their response has primarily been limited to defensive actions. On the other hand, it is reflected in the extremely high interception rate of Iranian missiles and drones, which currently stands at least 90 to 95%, possibly even slightly higher in some cases. These are really impressive numbers, given the fact that this is the first time they have been under such intense pressure. A huge shout out to the Emirati pilots here, who have been working non-stop to shoot down these missiles and drones. In this context, the UAE Ministry of Defense already released a video a few days ago showing the interception of Iranian missiles and drones. As of March 5, while I am recording this video, the UAE military reported to have intercepted more than 1,000 drones, 8 cruise missiles, and 181 ballistic missiles. Of course, they did not achieve all of this using fighter jets alone. For more than half a decade now, the Emirates have been working with Edge Group to build up their own domestic defense industry, which has resulted in the development of several homegrown air defense systems such as the Skynight for SHORAD purposes. I have reported on this before, and I want to note once